Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I have a terrific guest on today that, we talk so much about cybersecurity. We talk a lot about the Secret Service. And this is someone I met, dare I say it, decades ago, and as one of my own students. And now she is retired herself and setting the world on fire. So I knew that you had to meet her because not just because of her background, but because of what she's doing now. So we got a lot to talk about. Hazel Cerra, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Betsy.
So you have this like foot in two camps. We're gonna talk about cybersecurity and things like that. I mean, you're really on the cutting edge of so much right now. But before you're doing what you're doing, you had this whole other career as a Secret Service agent.
Yes, ma'am.
So first and foremost, I got to ask you, why'd you become a cop?
Wow, I knew you were going to ask me that question. I became a cop because when I was young, I always found myself having very little tolerance for people that were taking advantage of others. And my father always taught me to do the right thing, work hard. I was an immigrant. We came from Cuba when I was young, and I saw my father work really, really hard. As a matter of fact, I remember him saying that, because he didn't speak English at the time, that, when immigrants come to this country, you're hired for your arms and your legs. So he taught me to work hard, go to school, and do something important with my life. And I always gravitated to helping others. So when I went to college, I majored in criminal justice. So I knew early on that that was the field that I wanted to get into. And I graduated from there and I was hired by the Attorney General's office. I was investigating insurance fraud at the time. And that's when I started like really investigating cases and solving problems and really getting into the weeds of these investigations. And I felt like I was making an impact. So I became a cop because of those reasons. I really felt strongly about protecting others and more specifically the vulnerable.
And I'm so glad you said that because that a lot of us, you were raised like I was raised, where you do the right thing and you follow the rules and all that kind of stuff, and then you go into this field, and like with you working at the Attorney General's office, you're seeing people really taken advantage of, right? Like you're really seeing the dirty underbelly of people that we didn't necessarily see a lot as kids and things like that. What was your first thoughts there, though, that first time at the AG's office where you're like, wow, there's some really evil people out here?
Oh yeah, I saw a lot of that. I had one investigation that it was a gentleman that was claiming to be completely disabled, and he was trying to get disability benefits from the state. But we caught him practicing basically running around the field, and he was practicing for the marathon. And not only did he do that regularly, he actually ran the marathon, the New York Marathon, and he finished under 5 hours. So here's someone that was claiming to be completely disabled, wanted to just get a paycheck, and had all this evidence. I mean, he was every week he was out there training. So it was crazy to me that there'd be somebody that was doing that. And I ran my investigation. I went to the New York Runners Club in New York City, got the documentation that he, in fact, ran the marathon, had a picture of him finishing the marathon, and that's when it was like, wow, this is insane that people actually take advantage of, benefits that way. And that wasn't the only one. I mean, I had so many people that were claiming, to be completely injured and there wasn't anything wrong with them.
So you took that talent and that drive, and you decided to go into federal law enforcement, and you went into the Secret Service. Now, your average person thinks about the Secret Service as you go to the academy, you do some training, and then you're in the White House, right, watching the president. Tell people what's the reality of, and what else. I don't think people really understand what else the Secret Service does, because it's really, really fascinating.
Yes, so I joined the Secret Service because I felt like I wanted to set the world on fire, and I felt like I the space I was in was not sufficient for me. I wanted to do more. So the opportunity presented itself, and I was hired after a very long process. But I spent 25 years in the United States Secret Service, and my role was centered on protecting world leaders and obviously the president, a vice president, other foreign heads of state. And it wasn't just physically, but through protective intelligence, doing advanced work, critical systems protection. And, and later on in my career, I ended up running the cyber fraud squad in Philadelphia. And I finished my career as the resident agent in charge of the Atlantic City resident office. But throughout my career, I also investigated financial crimes. So it wasn't just counterfeit currency, but it was cryptocurrency investigations that I ended with. But in the beginning, it was more of credit card fraud, identity theft, and lots of skimming investigations. I mean, there was so much fraud out there. I mean, we were very, very busy and with those investigations, but it was that dual mission that really drew me. It was, the protection along with the investigations, and they complemented each other. And, you would hear the agents tell that to you, especially your supervisors. They would say if you were a good investigative agent, then you were naturally going to be a very good protective agent, and that it didn't really transfer both ways. And I was like, well, then I need to be a really good investigator because that's the secret, right? So I really invested all of my time trying to be the best investigator that I could, and I just had that natural ability to be very curious. And I mean, and we had all the resources to be curious and to be able to solve a case as long as you were enthusiastic about your work. And I was. And I remember my supervisor telling me, we could train you for everything, but we can't make you enthusiastic. And I was. And I really, really took that with a grain of salt. Like I remember feeling like, okay, there is something different about me. I'm not your average agent. I do enjoy what I'm doing. I do want bad people to be put away so that they can't harm other people. I really felt that mission. I had that calling to be protective.
Right. It wasn't just a way to pay your mortgage, right?
No, in fact, I didn't make enough money to pay a mortgage at that time. So
I want you to dispel a myth for me right now. I'm going to put you on the spot. When you have a protectee, whoever it is, president, vice president, whatever, um, let people know that you, as a Secret Service agent, don't get to say to your boss, "Oh, you know what? I don't like his politics. I'm not gonna protect him." Right? Tell people the reality of politics and being in the Secret Service.
I really am glad that you asked that question because we in the Secret Service, our task is to protect democracy. We are the guardians of democracy. It doesn't matter who is in office. At the end of the day, that person represents our country. And we don't want another government or anybody to threaten our democracy by changing history, by harming them. So no, we don't get to pick and choose which party they serve. We are there for a mission, and that is to protect our country and our democracy, period.
Did you ever walk through? Oh, I'm sure you did. You walk through the halls of, whether it's the Capitol or the White House, or any, any of the other spaces in our nation's capital, um, and just think to yourself, here I am, a kid from Cuba,
Yeah.
and this is where I am. I mean, you had to have some really profound moments, didn't you?
All the time, all the time. Just pinching myself like I can't believe that I'm actually here and I'm doing this. And, my father's not around anymore. So just, looking above and like, I hope you're proud of me and proud of what I'm doing here. I had that moment even more so when President Obama visited Cuba, and I was fortunate enough to go. and be there with President Obama in Cuba because I would never be able to go otherwise because of my background. So having that time in, a country where I was born in, that I was very young when I left, and being able to, experience history because the last president that was there was Carter so long ago. So there's been many opportunities, not just being in the White House or the Capitol or a building. It's just being able to witness history and being in the presence of the president. And even something so small that we see every day, being in front of Air Force One, I mean, I would always get chills just seeing it, just knowing that that represents this country that we're in. And my family and I, like, we're huge patriots. We love this country. We love the opportunities that it has given us. And I mean, it's the best role for me because I wanted to give back to my country the way that it gave to me.
I love that. That gives me chills. That's what we love this country, and of course we especially love its law enforcement officers. And I just love that description. You so you gravitated more toward the end of your career. You really got into something that, quite frankly, you can't open up a newspaper. That's metaphorical, of course. We all read all our news on our phone, but without learning about some cyber security attack, or someone being doxxed, or there's so much Bitcoin fraud, and just on and on and on and on and on. And that's your focus now, and that was your focus toward the end of your Secret Service career, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. When I was in the Secret Service, before I went to my protection time, I saw the shift where things were starting to transfer into the digital space. And when I completed my time in protection, it was completely different. The trends had changed where now we were seeing skimmers that had Bluetooth on them. We were dealing with network intrusions like the Target breach. So everything had changed more onto with the internet and the advent of social media, like everything just transitioned. So when I saw that shift, I knew that it was important for me to start learning about that if I wanted to continue to focus on my investigative skills, because counterfeit was less and less attractive. It wasn't really occurring very much. It was like less than 1% of the money being circulated was counterfeit in our country. So it just didn't make sense for me to do that anymore. I wanted to be challenged. So shifting over to the network intrusion space, getting that training, that was the new types of investigations. We were getting calls, a lot of small businesses that were being targeted, just because a lot of small businesses, we're used to being a cashless society. And during that time, I don't know if you remember, you probably do, going to the supermarket, you always paid cash. You never paid with a credit card. That was just weird, right? Like, you can't afford your groceries, you got to pay with a credit card. Well, that was the norm. And if you wanted to be a successful business, you had to start accepting credit card, because otherwise, you were going to turn away business. So having that shift, the owners didn't necessarily think about security. That was not part of their transition, or it was an extra charge if you wanted to have the cybersecurity tools in your payment system. So they wouldn't have it, or they'd have a family member that installed the system for them. So it became, they were vulnerable to these attacks. They were leaving the remote desktop on. And by leaving it on, you basically, was like leaving the door wide open for a threat actor to get in there and exfiltrate the credit card data. So we were seeing a trend of these, and it was, I remember going to several supermarkets, and I would just ask them, okay, who did your IT? And then I would get that information, and then basically have to go to all of the stores that this particular vendor created the infrastructure for payment systems, because it was all configured incorrectly, and there were going to be more attacks. So that just transitioned into more the evolution of fraud on the internet. And then there was always a team, we called it Critical Systems Protection, that supported the presidential visits. And for many, many years. I just didn't really know what they did. So the way the service structured it was that if you were a network intrusion agent or if you did forensic exams, then you could, enhance your training with what we called CSP, critical systems protection. And that was applying what you have learned in the cyber studies, applying it to a protective advance. So we were looking at all the infrastructures that were impacted with the presidential visit. And things like, for example, things you don't think about, like if he's going to go to a conference and the lights are connected to the network, well, a hacker can go in there and basically turn off the lights and scare everybody. And it could be like a mass exodus and create a lot of problems for us. So the lights, anything that was connected to the network, we had to and basically look at it and mitigate it. So I got involved with that.
See, and I'm glad you said that because we think about, I mean, everybody knows that fraud occurs, we're all on the internet now, everything's electronic. But even 10 or 15 years ago, all we were worried about was things like clicking on a bad link in an email, things like that. The old Nigerian prince scam, which I still know people who have been taken advantage of by that. But now it's so much broader, it's so much more sophisticated, and one of the big concerns, and I own a small business, is even for a small business owner is a hacker can quite easily get into all of your systems and take control of everything, right? Take control of your books and your presentations and your personnel stuff, and that's a real concern for pretty much every working American, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And the information is already out there. A lot of times when these breaches occur, that information is then placed into the dark web and criminals purchase it. So if you're not changing your passwords regularly, or if you're not using a password manager, that information is exposed, and it's just as easy as them just purchasing the passwords and getting into like your social media or your email or anything that you have.
So so here you are now, you're getting all this training, you've got this expertise, and you're thinking, well, maybe it's time to retire, right? Because 25 years
Yeah.
that's a long time. And you know, what what were what was your thought process? Like, what am I going to do for, because for people who don't know, cops, we tend to retire somewhere in our 50s, and you still have a lot of time to work. And what was your thought process in making that transition into the private sector, in part because you are such a runner and gunner that uh what was your thought process when it's like, geez, I'm not going to be an agent anymore, I'm going to go do something else? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, that's the crossroad for all of us, right? Like we know we can't stay forever, and many of us have like an idea of what we want to do when we retire. But the idea that I had when I was, an agent and when I first started, we all thought that we were going to be running some department in the financial industry with our, super investigative skills. That's kind of like what they tell you because that's what they're doing during that time, right? But things change. So my plan was really to start my own business. I felt like I want to do something for myself. I want to be able to have that work-life balance again. And I really wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but that was kind of what was sitting in the back of my mind. And it didn't happen that way. It did not happen that way at all. I got really just caught up with still being an agent. I was running my office. And during the end of your career, you're mentoring and you're coaching the new agents because the mission continues and they're young. So you have to basically do an intense brain dump on these individuals because the responsibilities that they have is so intense. It's just so demanding on them. So being able to have those conversations, really strong leadership, which we have, and I worked for some of the most amazing, incredible leaders, some bad ones too, but they really showed us why leadership was so important. And I realized that at the end of my career when I was coaching these agents. And I realized that when my time came up, I had to make a decision because I had the cyber background, I had that experience, and I wanted to utilize it. I didn't know exactly how, but I knew that if I continued and I wasn't applying those that expertise, I was going to lose them. So what we call skill rot. So I had to make a decision of where when I was going to leave. And anyway, what ended up happening was one of my colleagues recommended me for a position. And I wasn't really looking for anything at the time. So this literally was an amazing referral. And once I got to learn more about the company's name is Blackcloak. I was like, yeah, this is totally me.
I love that. I love that. So we're going to talk about what Blackcloak is and what you do. But I want to ask you one more Secret Service question. And we were talking a little off the air about this, but um, you know, I started as a female cop in 1980. That nobody wanted females then. Then when you started, there were quite a few women, more to come during your career, but there's still some uh and especially recently, women in federal service, especially women in the Secret Service in the last couple of years, have really gotten, I think, kicked in the teeth. Because everybody else sees, 2 seconds of a video or 5 seconds of a video and say, oh, she shouldn't be a cop. They shouldn't have women in the Secret Service, all that. Give me your thoughts on all of that, because you were a woman in a very male dominated organization for 25 years.
Yeah, so it's funny because that wasn't something that they taught you in school. So when I was in college and we're learning about criminal justice, never once did they say, "Well, there's not a lot of women in policing." They never talked about it. So when I was first hired with the Secret Service, I remember getting the list, and it had like all of your, the agents that were assigned to you in the class, and it was 24 of us, and I was the only female. And I remember looking at that list and I saw one that the name was Lon, Lon. And I was like, well, maybe that's a female. And when, and I remember telling my supervisor, like, there's no women in this class. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's pretty typical. That's normal. You'll be fine. There's plenty of women that, we have on the job now. So it just depends what assignment you're in, blah, blah, blah. He like kind of, waved it off like it was no big deal. I was terrified. I was like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? But training went well. I found 23 of my new best friends, very type A personalities. They were amazing, no complaints, got through training, that was fine. But I did realize that we had about 10% females on the job. It was very, very low, but it was also consistent with other federal law enforcement agencies. So we were all struggling with that. And it was the main reasons were, women wanting to have a family and not being able to have both, right? It was like you had to make the decision whether you wanted to be a mom or you wanted to be, a big bad blah 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 agent. So and then I saw a lot of females making that choice and they were leaving. So it really was hard because as you were getting to know somebody and getting familiar with them and creating that bond, that friendship, a couple of months later they'll say, oh, I'm going to have a family, I'm leaving. And it was tough because you just felt like, is that the writing on the wall for me? Like, is that what's going to happen? So like you, I also prolonged having a family because of that situation. So I waited until I was in my 30s. But I also saw some women that were waited too long and then they couldn't have children. So there was a conference that I went to, the WIFO conference, which really was a big eye opener for me, and you spoke at them. And I remember one woman saying, do men think about when they're going to have their children? No, they don't. They just have them. So why are you waiting? And that was all I needed. That was like, okay, I'm not waiting anymore. I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm just going to let it play out. So, that was one of the main challenges in the Secret Service as far as being a female. But other things that I remember was, not being in the same rooms or in the same, I guess, events as some of the guys. Like, the guys are gonna hang out afterwards and drink. They're gonna go to the ball game. They're gonna, be in the locker room longer and talk about things, and you're not present in those conversations, and it's not done intentionally. It's just that you're just not, one of the guys, and that's okay. I learned that I'm not one of the guys, and one of the guys aren't gonna want to be one of the girls. So why am I trying to be a guy? Like it doesn't make any sense. And I was comfortable in my own skin to be a woman, and that is what made me happy. Yes, I got my nails done. Yes, like to wear makeup. That's who I am. And it took me some time to realize that that was okay, because what I learned was that a lot of women you're basically suppressing your female tendencies. Like you are trying to curse more, to be one of the guys. You're kind of, wearing some men clothes and things like that. So it was just the studies were showing that. And when I became comfortable with myself, it was things changed. I felt like I could bring a new perspective to the table. I was able to shine in those areas where, there was competition, because I was competitive. So I could take on the challenges that some, people didn't want to do. And that's how I was able to shine, and then, kind of again bring a different perspective to the table. Whereas, my male colleagues, they were great, but, looking at us women, because we were the minority, um, they may have a different outlook on can we, handle ourselves in difficult situations. And that's something that's always in the back of your mind. And I don't care who you are, you don't know how you're going to react until you're in that situation. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. Just because a woman maybe acted a certain way, I've seen men act certain ways as well that weren't indicative of how a law enforcement officer should respond or should be. So I think we're all human, and regardless of gender, we all have a role in law enforcement, and we all work together as a team. And you have to have that team mentality. And I will tell you that one of the first things that my supervisor said to me, he said, we're not looking to hire the strongest people. We hire the smartest people, because we could throw 10 smart people at a dumb guy, at a big, strong guy. And that I've always remembered, and it stuck with me.
Well, and so here you are now. You've got a big title. I want you to tell people what that is at an organization called Blackcloak, and it's. I was reading, some of the stuff that you guys do and all that, and it's really fascinating. And you're using that brain now that you have in those investigative abilities. Talk about what you're doing, because it's fascinating.
Oh, well, thank you for that. So today in my role at Blackcloak, I'm translating those same principles of the presidential protection methodology into the digital world. Because we know that the reality is that you don't just protect the building, like we don't just protect the White House, right? We protect the president. So in the private sector side, we have to shift to protect the human. And that those humans now, they live a very exposed digital life in the digital ecosystem, especially our executives, because according to the Verizon DBR report, executives are 12 times more likely to be targeted than any other employee in the company. So they're very vulnerable. Back in the day, say, I don't know, let's say 60 years ago, the president was really the only person that was out there in the media, the news, on the newspaper, on the radio. And were people out there that didn't agree with the way the country was being run, right? So they wanted to take matters into their own hands. And that's where we had so many assassinations and assassination attempts. Well, now the executives are the ones that are visible. Because of the advent of social media, they're out there, in the media, same thing. And we haven't caught up with protecting them in the same way that the Secret Service has.
Well, and now we're in this society that, people see, an executive of a private company online. I mean, obviously we've had it happen, and they're like, I'm taking them out. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Or I'm going to dox them. I'm going to go harass them at their home. I'm going to go to their kid's school. I mean, people are crazy,
Yes,
and
they
they
are.
they they seem more emboldened, I guess, sometimes, to do things, because we live in this weird TikTok world of not only do I have to attack somebody, but I got to record it.
And that's just awful, right? Like people that are standing there instead of helping and they just pull out a phone to record. I mean, those videos just make me sick to my stomach. Especially when it's violent or when there's children that are being hurt and you're just standing there. That's the kind of stuff that just makes me crazy. I don't understand it. But yeah, that is a true challenge.
So I know we're running out of time, but I just got to say I'm gonna have to have you back for another segment. Because you chose the hero's path. You really did. From college on, you made that decision. And in part, based on the way you were raised, in part based just on your heritage, your gratitude toward a country that did afford your family, like all of our families, an amazing opportunity. You served, and now you're in the private sector again, doing some heroic and fascinating stuff. So tell people, Hazel, where they can connect with you. How can they find you?
So I am very active on LinkedIn. So you can connect with me there. I help a lot of executive protection firms fill that gap with digital executive protection. So please reach out to me if you need my help, even if it's just to have a conversation.
I tell you, I can't thank you enough for doing this interview, for spending time with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.